Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Andrea Pirro, and I'm the director of the Visiting Artists Program at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I am so delighted to welcome you to this evening's program by the Haas Brothers, Simon and Nikolai Haas. I would like to thank Simon and Nikki for taking the time out of their very busy schedule to come and share their work and their expertise with us tonight. I would also like to thank the Illinois Arts Council Agency for their support of tonight's program. For those of you that might be joining us for the first time, the Visiting Artists Program hosts a series of talks by internationally recognized artists, designers, and scholars each year to expand our thinking about contemporary art and culture. In addition to public programs, our guests meet with SAIC students through various engagements, and we look forward to hosting the Haas Brothers tomorrow for group critiques and discussions. So just a couple of notes before we get started. I'd like to ask you to kindly silence your cell phones at this time, and please note that video recording of the talk is not permitted. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time to take some questions from the audience before we conclude by 7:30. So please raise your hand if you have a question, and our staff will circulate microphones for your use. We just ask that if you're asking a question, if you could please keep it concise so we can get to as many questions as time allows. So now I'd like to welcome to the podium Pete Euler, who is Associate Professor in Designed Objects at SAIC, to introduce the Haas Brothers. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea, and thank you all for joining us tonight. It's a true pleasure to introduce our guests, Nikki and Simon Haas. As artists and designers, it is our job, at least in part, to present new alternatives, to imagine new ways of being and living, and to embrace nuance, curiosity, and the unfamiliar. The Haas brothers are shining examples of taking this role seriously. Since founding their LA-based studio, Haas Brothers, in 2010, Nikki and Simon have created a whimsical and materially captivating world through their furniture and objects. Embracing process and the slippery boundaries between art and design, utility and luxury, the Haas brothers' work is bold in perspective. Playful, fantastical, and at times irreverent, their work explores aesthetic themes related to nature, science fiction, sexuality, and psychedelia. They are prolific and inventive in their use of materials, which range from copper, porcelain, and fur to resins and polyurethane. And their approach illustrates the many ways in which ideas transcend media and discipline. The Haas brothers have a long and diverse list of collaborators, including Versace, Citizens of Humanity, Rihanna, Jessica McCormick, and the South African women's collective Monkey Biz, a nonprofit project dedicated to the economic upliftment and financial empowerment of women through the revival of African beadwork. Their work was included in the Cooper Hewitt Design Triennial in 2020 and may be found in the permanent collections of the RISD Museum in Providence, Rhode Island, the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, as well as the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. They were the recipients of the Arison Award in 2019, given by the Young Arts Foundation, and were recently the subject of 2 solo exhibitions at the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia, and the Katona Museum of Art in Katona, New York. The Haas brothers are opening a show of new work at Laura Reynolds Gallery in Austin, Texas, later this month. Please join me in welcoming the Haas brothers.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Nikki Haas. This is Simon.
Hi.
We're the Haas Brothers. I was like listening. It's always nice to listen to someone speak nicely about you. Anyway.
Thank you guys for having us here. We're really excited. This school is incredible. Chicago's incredible. And we're just really, really happy to be talking to you guys in such a beautiful town in this place. And we kind of formatted this, we don't usually show our early works necessarily, but we formatted this to show you how we started out and then sort of what we're working on right now. So a lot of in-process things and not as much just finished works.
I think we figured we'd be talking to a lot of students and artists and makers, so it would be good to just sort of let people in on our process and so you could appreciate it.
So we kind of founded our studio out of necessity in 2010. The two of us were in LA and really needed work, and we grew up just making stuff because our parents are both really creative. Our dad made furniture and was a stone carver. And so we kind of were picking up odd jobs all over the place. Our first jobs were actually just set design because that's really common in LA. So we were making these weird like robot helmets and just various set pieces. And then began to move into furniture. We grew up making furniture with our dad, so it was really a kind of a normal thing for us to be doing.
Yeah, this is, so we when we first opened our studio, we did it on a job for building basically like cabinets, I guess you'd call them, kind of like these like sculptural cabinets for Johnston Markley, who's like an incredible architecture firm. And we kind of opened as a cabinet business, and we were doing a bunch of different jobs for them. And this is an installation we did for them. It was the first time that we designed furniture where someone had asked us to design, furniture as designers, right? We'd been fabricators up until this point. It's actually got a pretty funny story. We were working with them and doing kind of a lot of different projects, and they were like, "Hey, we have this Geoponte bed, and like the threading on one side got kind of loose, and so part of the frame cracked a little bit." We're like, "Oh yeah, we can fix it. Just give it to us. We'll do it for free. Whatever. We're doing all this other stuff for you." And we were broke, and we didn't really have like a proper van or anything like that. And we had it in the back of our truck, like on the 10 freeway, and it flew off of the truck because it wasn't strapped down properly, and then it was like literally like a movie. We like pulled over, like, let's go get it. It was like already all scraped up. It was on the highway. It was like a 16-wheeler, and it was like, and then like went right over it, and it like smashed into literally like 5 million pieces. And we were like picking them all up and like, we can fix it. It was no way we were gonna fix it. But it was actually, so I'm sorry, I'm digressing because it's kind of I think it's a theme in our studio, which is we learned a really big lesson that week. We called Sharon and Mark, who are the principals of Johnston Markley, and we told them. Sharon was pissed, and she was like, "Come to the office right now," and we did, and she came in and she laid into us, and rightfully so. And then Mark came in and he was all like mellow, and he was like, where I come from, the word for disaster also is the word for opportunity. It just depends on the inflection. And so why don't you guys build us some furniture, basically, in exchange for this priceless bed you destroyed. Yeah. And we were like, that's a good deal. So we did it, and
it turned out to be really cool. And the house itself was a very cool mid-century house that was partially designed by Frank Lloyd Wright's son or something, and then it was a really cool project. Yeah. We screwed up so bad, and then ended up having a good thing come out of it. But we wanted to show you these because they don't make sense. If you know what our stuff looks like, you would never know that was our work. But it was kind of pointing to the sort of swoopy forms that we use and some material experimentation. They're made out of resin that's been we used a belt sander on it to give it almost like more of a wood texture, I guess. So it has a feeling that's not plasticky, even though it's made out of plastic.
But for me, I think for both of us, the important takeaway was we failed really badly, and it was okay. And in fact, not only was it okay, we built our first real, individually designed, like we autonomously designed this furniture. And so it just, I think there's a theme through our career. We take a lot of risks. You'll see at the very end, we're going to show you the show that we're installing at Laura Reynolds in Austin, risky. And you'll see that it's, well, anyways, it's important. It's part of a career. I think if you want to progress and do well, you have to be willing to let the Geoponte bed explode on the 10 freeway. So, anyway.
So this, I'm going to go a little quicker through these guys here, but we made, in keeping with the like set design stuff, we got the opportunity to make all the masks on these guys that were crawling all over Lady Gaga, which was kind of cool. So that was our first like sort of big collaboration, even though we were nameless in the thing. It was really cool for us to get to do that.
We got paid too. Like up until this point, we
Yeah.
were doing a bunch of shit for free. It just, sort of, that was a big moment.
We decorated the Ace Hotel lobby in Los Angeles. We made murals. LA is covered in celebrity murals, and we wanted to make our own kind of version of that. So we did these pencil drawings all over the walls and made this front desk. Our work was really scattershot, and a lot of what we were doing was fabrication. This project was really cool. It was for Peter Marino at the Guerlain flagship store in Paris. They gave us a direction to create a ceiling that made it look like you were underwater, and we had to figure out how to make that out of stainless steel. So we used a method of where we like improperly heat the steel and cool it off so that it buckles by itself. But then we had to figure out how to attach it to this historic building, and it was really hard.
That was hard.
I don't think we would choose to do this again, but it turned out to be really pretty.
Our welder fell in love with some Parisian girl and left the project in the middle of it. So I had to watch YouTube videos on how to weld stainless, which was terrifying. Anyway, go ahead.
And then we had a really big thing happen. While we were making all of these projects, we were sort of self-funding these little like material studies and making random odd objects. And we were in New York and carrying around this Trader Joe's bag full of little samples. And our like publicist manager that we had at the time introduced us to somebody, and we showed him all these samples. And he said, I think I know somebody who would really like this like brass process that you guys do. And it turned out to be Donatella Versace. And we were lucky enough to create like a full furniture collection and some fashion objects. This is where you start to see our work a little bit more. It's got a process that we call hex tile, where we take little tiles, hexagonal tiles of brass, and then hand hammer each one of them and sort of miter the edges and tweak them until they fit. And it takes months to do each one of these things.
I think it's a moment too where we got permission to mess around and experiment. And as weird as it sounds, being given permission to create work and to expand into realms that you maybe hadn't before and be able to go into the unknown is part of, I think, a successful career and a successful practice. And this was amazing because she was just so sweet and so easy to work with. And she was like, "Oh, I love it. Just make some crazy shit."
Yeah.
And so we did it. It was great.
And there you can start to see there's a piece. I want to use this laser pointer. There's this thing here. We called it a bondage bench, and it was like wrapped really tightly with leather straps. And that was our first sort of step into using sexuality in any of our furniture. This is a set of the very first pieces that we ever made, and we were able to, after all of these projects, sort of start self-funding a few little objects, this being one of them. This is a light fixture. We call these Zoidbergs, which are based on Dr. Zoidberg from Futurama.
His lips.
His lips are like this. And then the same process we had used on the Versace furniture, we started to just create our own forms. This one, we wanted it to be like a tractor seat that became a stool. And these, in keeping with that bondage theme, these were vases that we created by pouring plaster into pantyhose and then tying them off to create forms.
Yeah, and then we would make molds and cast them in bronze. More sexuality. So I, this is another story, but I went to, my wife's a stylist. She's in fashion, and she got invited to do a shoot for Vogue in Iceland. And one of my best friends at the time or still one of our best friends, was taking the photographs, and they were like, basically, let's go have a free vacation in Iceland. So I was shooting backup photography, which I'm the worst photographer of all time. But so I got to go, and we were in a gas station, and behind the counter, there was like this huge warehouse full of fur. And I was like, holy shit, what's all that stuff back there? And they're explaining, the government, the government basically subsidizes gas stations because otherwise you wouldn't be able to drive around the island without running out of gas. So we're actually a furrier, so I brought one of these home, and it was sitting in our studio for a long time. It was an Icelandic sheepskin, which is at the time food byproduct. We don't use fur any longer. Now we only use synthetics, but at the time it was always food byproduct or government calling byproduct. And we just didn't know what to do with it. And we'd proposed at one point some feet to Johnston Markley that were like, what if a couch had like feet on it, but feet, like couch feet, but they're actually feet. And they thought it was the stupidest idea of all time, which fair enough, it kind of was. But then we started making couches with feet, which eventually turned into these little objects. And, honestly, it was sort of one of our first slides, that alongside the ceramic process we did, where they started as functional objects and pretty quickly became sculptural. And it was very easy to sort of blend between those two. So that one you saw a second ago was like a toy, is what we were saying. So we could sell it in the design market and still have people accept it as a design object, but quickly became much more sculptural. So
this is a light fixture that we made also with hex tile. The top is little plastic rods that we heat gunned to make like little hair tops. I don't know what they are. These are some ceramics. This was another one of our early processes. If you've seen our ceramics in the wild, they're much more developed than this. These were pretty early in the process, but this was just something we kind of stumbled on, but we were painting the surface of a piece of ceramic with slip, which is very wet clay, if you don't know. And when you paint it on, it goes on in a pretty uneven coat and makes little bumps. And if you paint again, each bump will catch a little bit more clay. So it accentuates that bump, and then you keep on brushing, and it ends up growing like a cave, sort of. And we were fascinated by it because there's an element of painting and the human hand, but then there's mostly this sort of physics and the limitations of clay itself creating that surface texture that looks like fur. It was our the first time we ever had a process that created kind of an emergent shape.
So these are early works that would be, I think, considered the first of our studio practice, right? In a way that you see some main themes that you'll see carry through our whole career so far, which is emergence is a big one, or just playing with physical properties and trying to see where they go, and then humor, and trying to understand humor's place inside of sculptural work. So
this is an example of kind of humorous. This was either California Raisin or Raisin d'etre, I think is maybe the name of this one. We also name all of our stuff really stupid names, intentionally. We were sort of responding to the names of like design objects or paint colors that you see, like Hampton's Breeze or something like that. We didn't like those types of names, so we decided to go in the absolute opposite dumb direction, and kind of drawing also from our childhood with like Garbage Pail Kids and the sort of punny names that exist in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, I mean, also, if you go into like a white cube gallery and you look at an artwork and it says Untitled One and it's an abstract painting, it doesn't mean it's not a powerful work. I think just for us coming into the art world as outsiders, really, in the way that we were working our way into it, we wanted the name to be like, okay, I see you. If you're looking at this, you deserve to see it. And even if you're just laughing a little bit at the end of it, we've had an experience and an exchange, which is more important than, I think, like, even if it, to some people, I think would diminish the work because we're not taking it seriously. But to me, it's all that more important that you make a human connection rather than isolating the person the second they start looking at your work.
Yeah,
So-
and then we love to have that first impression, and then if you want to go deeper, making this was actually extremely difficult. We wanted to recreate the texture on a prune, or I'm saying prune. He'll tell you testicles.
Simon's like, oh man, I made this ball sack texture.
That's what I was actually going for. But we blew up a balloon and glued leather onto it, and then popped it and spray painted it and traced the pattern that the crinkle had, and then stretched swimwear fabric over stretcher bars and sewed leather onto it in that exact pattern, and then cut the whole thing off so that it would shrink, and it mimicked it really well. So it just, for this sort of, the punchline being that name and the shape being pretty like quick and expressive, the surface treatment was so intense, and that's another theme that runs through our work. The same process was used on these curtains. This was a really important work for us. We showed this at Design Miami in 2012, 13.
Yeah, God. Between 2012 and 2014 at some point.
We were kind of rebellious inside of Design Miami. They have a lot of rules, and that annoyed us. And we were, I studied architecture and then dropped out and went into painting, and I always was like, we had the same discussions about form versus function and like hierarchies of art, and just kind of being irritated by the categorization. And so we just wanted to create these sort of like phallus sculptures, but turn them into light fixtures. And this is really a nod to Niki de Saint-Phal. She has a big sculpture where you walk in to a vagina. So we created that here. And then on the inside, we had paintings, which we actually listed as frames. So we were selling frames. And then we had sex toys inside, and we argued that those were functional. So we were kind of just like poking at Design Miami.
We were kind of daring them, to be honest. Like, in hindsight, I was like, we were being kind of brats, but in a good way. I mean, It was cool because we were sort of daring them to kick the stuff out of the fair. Because there's a pretty stringent process, like once you get it there. There were some video art objects in there. There was like one thing where you stick your hand inside and you like fondle some, like a penis. And like, different, but the idea was that they were designed because they were functional, because they were allowing you a sexual experience that you might not otherwise, want to or be able to commit to. And so,
which
anyways,
is, it begs the question of what function exactly are you going for when it comes to design? And I mean, beauty you could say that beauty is functional. Cuteness is also really functional, because you wouldn't want to take care of a young animal, for example, if it wasn't so cute. So that's it's not so clear cut, and a lot of our early career was based on sort of trying to get people to think about that division.
I really felt like we won with this artwork when we had like our older brother and some of his friends into our studio, and they're like, kind of bros, and like we have this like thing that you reach in and you fall in a little penis, but you can't tell that's what's going to happen when you first put your hand in. It's like kind of like an obscure hole in this. It kind of looks like this thing on the left, but there's a hole in it. You can put your hand in, and he's like, "Whoa, this is beautiful. What's going on?" And he puts his hand. He goes, "Bro," like this. He's like, "Oh," takes his hand out. Which, first of all, to get someone to be able to touch something and understand it's a penis that quickly is kind of hard,
Yeah,
actually.
it
We had
was.
to really worked on it for a long time. And then later we were like, you know, in another part of the studio with some friends, and he was back over in the corner testing it out again. Like,
Yeah, he thought he
one
was alone.
looking. We were like, we won, we got it to work. Like he's gotten deeper into an experience that he didn't understand, but we opened someone's mind, you know, like, anyways.
I'm going to flip quickly through just some of the things that we really like. I mean, we're surrounded in LA by these types of plants. You'll see this shape show up a lot for us. Mushrooms, I'm sober, and Nikki doesn't really use anything at all, but we used to be pretty focused on psychedelia. And that theme showed up and still sometimes shows up, I think now in a more mature way, probably. But then also emergent patterns. So like the pattern on that shell is very similar to cellular automata, which is like a logical rule in math. And then how does that hyperbolic shape form on that flower? We're just really into these sort of cartoonish trees, and then like kind of awe-inspiring patterns and natural processes. Then, you know, when we were making sexual work, we were like, this is so weird for furniture, but we realized it's not. And Catherine the Great had a huge collection of that's hers. Really wild furniture, and just incorporating sexuality, which is so human, into these objects that are also very human and that you interact with, I think felt to us like a real way to interact with objects and have a relationship with them.
Well, also, like, I mean, I feel old saying it, but like 10 years ago when we were showing our like sexual objects in Design Miami, it was like scandal. You know what I mean? Everyone was talking about it. Now I think there's like a good amount of sexual work in Design Miami, and I sort of think we kind of broke that barrier initially, which is weird because you go, okay, Catherine the Great was making sexual work hundreds of years ago, or commissioning works like that, and people were kind of, so it's weird to just have this moment of being like revisiting something people had already gotten over hundreds of years ago, and like a very modern, affluent, you know, venue. But anyway.
So then we also have really dumb references like Garbage Pail Kids, which we grew up with. Ren and Stimpy also we grew up with, and Futurama. I think part of that comes from the fact that the two of us were twins and we experienced a lot of the same things, and we're both coming from pretty different mindsets all the time, but we have a really similar bank of reference points. And so these things pop up over and over. I showed that because the Ren and Stimpy butts there translated into this piece where it's a bench kicking its hind legs into the air with a butt. Doing that, it was the most insane thing to do because this also has that hextile process on it. And it added like an extra month and lots of expense and backbreaking work just to create that little joke. So again, we're really trying, when we want to make a joke, we really commit to it. This is, you can side by side for the Zoidberg reference. This was our first Zoidberg. We actually originally based it on Poor Unfortunate Souls from The Little Mermaid. And then this is a little collage of if any of y'all have not been to Austin, Texas, it especially when we were growing up, it was like a really hippie kind of a place. And there's a Daniel Johnston mural that says, "Hi, how are you?" that everyone knows there, that has shown up in our work a ton. And then just like weird head shops and this like dinosaur that was on top of a pizza place. So
Chicago style pizza, actually, right?
Oh yeah.
Just saying, Manja.
Full circle.
Yeah, it's gone now, but it was great.
And then the jackalope. So the jackalope
Texas
is
lore.
Yeah, Texas lore. It's a chimera that also entered our work because we make these bizarre sort of animal pieces.
By the way, I couldn't even convince my 5-year-old son that a jackalope is real.
I know.
I was like, it's real. He's like, no, it isn't. Like, all right.
This was an early beast bench. It's just a little or stool that is made to look like it might walk away. A little collection of beast creatures. You should talk about these ones because Nikki's sculpting them.
So I really feel like I look at, although it's changing now. I remember when we were first making these, it was like, comedy never would win an Academy Award. People just didn't take humor seriously, and it's like humor is a very, very, very important function in humanity, right? Like you need it to discuss really difficult subjects, and I think like if someone was like, what are you adding to your practice, or what's your purpose in your professional life? I'd say I'm a sculptural humorist. That's really what I'm better at than almost anything is getting humor across in sculpture. And I find it really important. And these are just sort of studies. How can I sculpt something with very little information that still gets across a lot of emotion, humanity, humor in it? And so it's like legs, horns, and sometimes like a part of a face, like a tongue or lips. But that was really that was the point of these guys, was to try to create. I call them personality portraits, but really I would think about a friend, and not the friend as a whole, but just like a little part of them, like when they're being funny or sad or shy, and just sculpt like a little animal that represented that little piece of them. So that's what these are. They're like little personality portraits.
And this is, again, we've stopped using fur, but we grew up around it a lot because we were in like a hunting culture in Texas, and we were exposed to a lot of taxidermy, and it's just scary looking and very creepy. And so when we decided to start using it, we were really interested in like removing as many features as possible. I mean, this is sort of an uncanny valley issue where if you make it cuter and take away some of the, stop trying to make it look like an animal, it becomes much more relatable. Which is kind of there's an interesting study in that, I think.
I feel like most people understand Uncanny Valley, but maybe you want to just explain it a little bit.
Well, like if you don't know what it is, if you make a robot, the closer you make it look to a person, the more revolting it is.
More attractive until it's like...
When it looks too much like a person, you're revolted by it, but then if you like make its eyes big and make it cute, all of a sudden it's like even more, you have more empathy for it.
So it's like more and more and more and more human until it's like too human, and it goes down, and then back up when it's obviously not human. It's almost like enhanced, right? So that's the valley, is in the graph.
Okay, so these are rugs that we made. We made a series of extinct animals. That zebra is a specific type. I think it's Burchell's that's extinct. But we were basing it on the fruit stripe gum zebra that we grew up with.
If you know what we're talking about, you're at least in your 30s.
Yeah.
I think.
There was a zebra with rainbow stripes on gum. And so we made that as a rug, and it's all like roadkill. Again, a reference from childhood.
There's so much roadkill in Texas.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Okay, and then moving on to some process work. This is a bead process that we came up with in our studio. I was talking about cellular automata earlier. This is sort of like that. Basically, we write programs for beads, and when I say program, I don't mean in a computer, but using sort of computer logic, exactly, and treating beads as units, as zeros and ones. The white beads in this are a 0 and the black ones are a 1, and you just describe rules for how they get strung on based on what color they are, and it winds up making thousands and thousands of shapes. It's cool because it's a closed system. There are only so many shapes you can make in it, but it's pretty versatile.
And it's emergent. right?
Also emergent,
So
yeah.
Simon's writing a code, and then it's being executed by a human hand. There's a couple other things about this that are important, which is it goes back to our project in South Africa too, where we were trying to come up with work where people could make things in their homes, so they could go to school, they could take care of their kids, they could work at night, it could be supplemental for them. So Simon was searching for a way, and again, this is sort of his design mind at work, right? We're trying to show sculptural work again still, I think, at this point in Design Miami, and going like, well, what if the design is just a problem or a puzzle that you're trying to solve? Like, what if the design is like, how do you create work for somebody that is limited in time and studio space and can work with us, and that we can now diffuse our art fabrication budgets towards communities that could actually really benefit from it, rather than just sort of like pissing away money towards some huge art fabricator.
Exactly,
So
and as we started to get a little more successful, we understood that art is an effort that it depends on if you're just a solo painter or you do stuff like what we do, but on a larger sculpture level, you tend to wind up needing to outsource some things. And we experience a lot of you hire like a large foundry to do something, and then it just comes to you. And it's nice to send off a design and then have it arrive, but we wanted it to be more intimate. And we were also thinking, what Nikki was saying, can we use that budget to spread it to makers that we have relationships with and that actually could use the work. So that's where we got obsessed with beadwork. I spent 5 years sort of just testing these things, and we wound up creating a similar project to the South African one in Lost Hills, California. It's a farming community where there's very little work for women generally, and a friend of ours has a farm out there and asked us to come bring this bead system to them. So it's really cool because we teach the program language, write down a little tiny string of code, and then anyone can build it, not even knowing what the shape is going to be. So these are a few examples of shapes that come out of it. Some little, those were like date leaves or something like that. This was a century plant. All of the objects are identical, which is wild, because they were made by like 30 different people. This is the century plant in practice.
So it's a bunch of parts that we then assemble in our studio, so we can outsource these parts in a way that feels dynamic, right? It's not just like, hey, you make this thing, here's design, buy. It's like we had a group of 30 women working in Lost Hills to make this whole set of work, which I think there's more photos of this body work.
There are, and also, so this plant here, the leaves were made with the same kind of logical system, but we were using basket weaving with parachute cord and electrical wire to make these shapes. And we put beeswax on the parachute cord to make it feel a little more romantic, and it turned out to be a really cool sort of posable surface. So they're perfect shapes, and then we twisted them up. These are palm trees we made using all the same process. We started to try to incorporate some of that into our ceramics, basically using slip trails, so similar to accretion, except using a little pipette and drawing ring after ring with a sort of rule for generation. Here's a drawing of some of the beadwork when I was figuring it out. And then this is how we conceive of shows. So Nikki and I will go visit a spot, and Nikki tends to, so if you haven't noticed, I'm kind of more analytical, and Nikki's much more feeling. And we always start, though, with a feeling.
I didn't know how to draw. And this is an early drawing. I'm laughing because I'm looking at it, going, it's almost embarrassing. But the thing is, I remember originally presenting drawings to people and then being like, whoa, this is the drawing you're presenting. It's sort of like a cartoon and just be like stupid doodles. But I mean, if you spend enough time drawing, like, you know, the things that I send now are pretty buttoned up and like professional looking, but this is what they used to look like, just pencil on paper, which is, you know. Anyway. Yeah, so you get it.
I love it.
I mean, you know, there's ideas.
We didn't. I don't think we made this one, but we should.
We didn't get to make it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, so this is. I wish we had the second, the actual beaded object after this. But this is the way we would interact with our friends in South Africa. Is we really wanted the project to be with South Africa. We wanted it to be really collaborative. Like we would start with a drawing, we'd deliver it. They would make the work, and at the time, Cooper Hewitt had given us the opportunity to do a museum show. It was our first museum show, and we're really excited to be part of their triennial. And
we did it as like a group project.
Right. It was everyone's just names in alphabetical order. It wasn't like a Haas Brothers show, and that was sort of the point. That was like the artwork of it, right? Like it's our first museum show, but we did this as a group of people, and there's all these unsung heroes working on the project, and we're all craftspeople and makers, and that this is really sort of a triumph of makers, right? Because it's a community in the way that you work together. But
and makers tend to get overlooked. I mean, when Nikki and I were fabricators, we were frequently pushed aside, and I mean, someone even came into our studio once and said, "Don't hand out your business cards." I mean, it was
that
like,
was one of our jokes for a while.
Yeah.
We were like, they were having a client come in, and they'd fabricated a completely fake artist that we were fabricating for, and he was walking around, he was going, no business cards, like very adamantly against it, which is sort of, you know, proprietary. In this world, there's a lot of people that hold things super close to their chest, and it's just not our vibe at all.
We love team. Actually, I want to point out that Justin is here, who was a big part of our team. Actually, he lives in Chicago again now. But we're very we're very much about the community that we're working in and with, and it adds so much to the work if we're doing it all.
So we would start with these drawings, and then they would end up becoming these beaded objects. So this is one of them. If you saw the drawing, it looks as cartoony and undefined as the one you just saw. And you know, you can see more of those works in the background. And so now you're seeing a mix of the sculptural works that we make in South Africa, which are more sort of what we call the Afriques, which are the sort of animalistic beaded works, and then these plant-like works were the ones that we're making in Lost Hills. So the idea here was that we were working with two different communities that were both using either weaving or beadwork. So they're really making similar works, both of them through the venue of our studio practice, but that you just get very different types of work. You know, which is pretty cool. And then when you put them in a room together, their common line is the fact that these communities have engaged with us in similar ways, but have output such
the
different
materials
types.
too. I mean, that's one of the things that we also going back to how we operated with Design Miami. I think that craft gets overlooked often, like beadwork as a craft, or basket weaving, or like knitting isn't often considered to be on a level with painting, and we don't really like that either. So we wanted to make the focus of our biggest solo show purely about those crafts, which I'm happy that we did that. Oh, this is out of order, but this is the process for that couch. Some more of those ponytail objects. A much better example of accretion once we had figured out kind of the mechanics behind it. Another group of accretion vases. And then
Beast's furniture.
Yeah.
So like this, we kind of went in backwards order because these really came before the sort of little sculptural toys, and then eventually big sculpture too. But
this one, again, we wanted our objects to feel alive and like you could interact with them, and we loved the idea of if no one's sitting at the dinner table, that it's still like there's kind of a party happening.
It's already a dinner party, and then you get to sit on top of the party. So.
And now I think we're moving into either works that we would like to make or are currently making.
We got to move into the realm of large-scale sculpture work, so that's really more the focus of our practice now. Of course, we still will always plant our foot in design and do all this other type of work, but so we're sort of moving into that realm now, I think.
This is an idea for a spa. I don't know what room it is, but
It was just an idea.
a hot room with maybe cold water coming out of this thing. And this is cool. We, during the pandemic, like most people, or a lot of people, wound up being very, having to do everything on a computer. So I got really into using Blender, which is a great free 3D modeling program. And you can do physics simulations in it. So we wanted to build on the theme of Zoidbergs, but build a like a blank that has physics in it. So this is built kind of like those wooden snakes that you can go like this and they kind of slither because they have little slits in them. This is a series of a stacked set of plates basically with virtual springs on them and then a bunch of springs all over the surface. Every green point you see here is a spring. And we can run it through different physics simulations and create all these really wild shapes. So this is it moving. And we're just, so this one, the base is moving around and then an invisible ball slams into it. And we were really into the idea that we can create kind of the framework for this thing, but the shape itself is emergent again. So that's this theme kind of continuing through.
So we've got our ceramic process, which is like layer upon layer, and you end up with an emergent shape that comes from it. We've got the beading system that Simon's created again, where you have a little formula that makes very big, crazy looking, very natural shapes, which are also emergent. And then this one, which is sort of, I feel like starting maybe the first time that we've done that, where it starts with this sort of expressive shape and then is being thrown into a simulation that then filters it into an emergent work, which is fun and weird and cool for us to do that for the first time.
A balance of like control and then total lack of control, which I think we love.
Control, lack of control. So anyway.
This is, here's a simulation of one that we wound up building. So we'll show you that. This is two interacting with each other. And it's cool, we choreograph it's all invisible stuff happening at the bottom of them, but we're sort of just creating these motions and then run a simulation, which takes a while, and sort of hoping that it does something cool. And we wind up creating bronzes out of those, so we'll sort of freeze frame it and pull the 3D file out of it and create a bronze.
What's really fun about this simulation too is that the simulation itself is emergent. You have a final sculptural form coming out of a simulation. And what also is really cool is you have a video that you then get to pick a moment. And depending on who you talk to and which moment you pick, it can display what we've discovered to be very different emotional values. Like different people read it. They go, oh, it looks like they're hugging. Or in this moment, it looks like they're fighting. Or they look exasperated in this moment, which is really interesting because I think the function of art, or one really big part of art, is that as a media or form, artists get a lot of opportunity to like let the audience decide what it is that they're looking at. It gives a lot of space. And this is a perfect example of that. We're not trying to put across any specific emotion, yet it comes through in the way that people look at it. They really do interpret it the way that they do. Literally, it's a physics simulation.
Yeah,
they may never know that, right? Just looking at the sculpture. They're having an experience with it. That's the whole point.
And that we had an experience of it, like also right. We chose this moment because it feels sort of romantic, but ultimately it came out of one of the coldest processes you could think of, honestly, and left a lot of it up to chance, but then we sort of chose this moment that felt very sweet. So there's something interesting to us about the leap from this sort of inanimate thing to it feeling kind of alive.
And then you're playing with a moment of like, well, first of all, we were looking at this and we didn't know if it was a rendering or not. We forgot. We thought it was a photo. It's not. It's a rendering. Simon made it, and it's like you get into this space of being, I don't know. That's cool. Like, is it emotional or is it a simulation? And you get to talk about consciousness and all kinds of other really exciting, cool topics that I think that's really the point. right?
Yeah.
You get to explore things inside of yourself that you don't really understand, which is cool.
So this is just a few of those that we made physically.
These are real, yeah.
Yeah. And these were just on display with Marianne Boski, and we had a show in San Francisco. This is a video of them.
They're in bronze, white patina. Those are really fun to make. And then again, just to sort of bring you into our process. So this is a piece of we made this large scale sculptural work for the Katona Museum of Art, and it started. That was it in a wax. This is it getting welded together, and then Simon in one of its eyes, and then eventually, getting some glass eyeballs, and then this is the finished work here. So this is a pretty cut and dry when we're talking about fabrication, right? You send it to some big bronze foundry. That's exactly what we did here. This started as a little clay model. I sculpted it. We did a 3D scan. Simon sculpted it even more inside of 3D. We delivered the file to a really great foundry in upstate New York. And then we would go back and forth, pick the patinas, and work on the project together until we ended up with this really massive, massive work. Another example of that, this is what the clay looks like originally. It's just plastilina, right? It's the same stuff Rodin used in the 1800s. And here's like a big old bunny. This is going to getting installed in Chinatown in LA. And it was our first like city-funded
Public sculpture?
like sculpture work,
Yeah.
which is really cool, public sculpture work.
So here's a bunch of unfinished things. Okay, this is funny. We wanted to make lighters. This is a cigarette dispenser. You'll see the video. And then this is the lighter. They're counterparts. We haven't made this, but we want to. And then, do you want to say something about them?
Well, no, we're getting ready to make a big set. We're calling them rabbinets, right? Because the rabbit that you saw, the big 9-foot sculpture, will make something like that, but you open it and it's it's like it's a cabinet inside, but it's a rabbit, and then
Full of little like rabbit objects.
So that was going to be sort of our like party cabinet, right? You'd have like cigarettes and like weed grinders and wine glasses and all kinds of other shit in there. That if you want to have a party, you can have everything you would need to have a party inside the rabbit.
This was an early concept sketch for a giant tree that we want to make. We're going to make a 14-foot tall beaded tree.
So it started with I just sketched in Procreate on the left, and then Simon rendered it on the right in Blender. So you can kind of see like it changes a little, but not a lot.
And
but
then
you can kind of see it progress.
Then
it
it
gets
changes
deeper and deeper.
a whole lot because we started to do the actual tests and beads. This is I'll show you the beadwork in just a second. So this is what the beads look like. I will really quickly say that the beads themselves all came from Murano. We bought a defunct bead factory, or we bought the contents of the defunct bead factory, and they're from like the 1800s, early 1900s.
The mafia came in and like was charging us for shipping, shipping. But we had to go pack everything. It was crazy. So 4 of us had to go carrying like the limit in cash that we could in order to pay off it was a whole thing. But we ended up with the most insane beads from Murano. But like we were in the factory, which had vines, and like it was raining coming through. There were like scorpions and tarantulas and stuff, and it was pretty fun.
So for us, this tree, at least to us, it encompasses all of the work we did in South Africa and then in Lost Hills, and then us going and actually physically getting all these beads that have such a rich history in Venice. And so it's just like this object will be very special to us when it's made.
It's a fun thing about making too is you get the opportunity to insert so much of yourself into a thing, Like, I don't know, it's one object, but it has like memories from Venice and Murano and South Africa and Lost Hills, and then all the time that we spent on it and the people that we're doing it together with. It becomes like a quilting circle, really. In a way, we all sit there, we're beating, we're making a thing, and it's like that's what I think, like, even looking at it as somebody that's just walking in and seeing the tree for the first time, you'll get this vibe off of it, right? You'll be able to feel the human interaction that happened around it, So this is sort of more just straight fabrication. So a clay model. This guy I think of as like an astronaut. We call them fruit pickers, but it's like you can notice that the fur that's sculpted on it isn't like natural. It's more like a suit. So we made a miniature. We made it really big. And then I was going to include another photo or a drawing in here that we forgot, but it's like, so now, just to sort of give a window into the process, it started as a weird little model that I was just making. We scanned it. We made a little bronze, which looked great, so we made it a little bit bigger. Then someone in Shanghai saw it, and now we've put together a proposal where we might make it like 6 meters tall, which is huge. So it's sort of like part of that process where it's like, you know, you can make something this big, and it can become huge if you just put momentum behind it. But some rugs that we've made.
Taking the Nikki's drawing style and like formally applying it to a rug.
And that was a portrait or a drawing about Simon and I went with two really good friends of ours on an
airboat tour?
An airboat in Florida, yeah. And it was really fun.
Can you
so
tell?
that was about the airboat boat in Florida, but just some sort of psychedelic.
This is all kind of out of order actually, but we made this for. We got approached by Rihanna to do a book stand because she released this very heavy book and wanted to make a stone stand for it. So this is that. Pretty cool. The stand is ridiculous. I mean, to have this be your book stand is the most impractical thing I can think of.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Oh, here, more of our process. So this is so we really wanted to make where we grew up in Austin. And there's these thing called moon towers there, which the legend goes, I don't know if it's true or not, but there was like a serial killer in Austin in the late 1800s, and there was not enough light, and that's why it was happening, I guess. So they put up these huge towers. They're like 200-foot tall towers, which is sort of this first street lamps in Texas, I guess. And but they're super, super tall, and they emulate moonlight, and they're actually super beautiful. And we grew up a block away from one of them. There's only like 6 left. I think they installed 20-something at some point.
And it was cool because every time you step outside at night, you're in like a full moon or even brighter, but it feels very much like moonlight.
And we were working on a ballet, and the central theme of our ballet, we're still working on it now. There's this one song called Clair de Lune, which means moonlight, right? And by Debussy, and he'd based it on the Claude Verlaine poem, which is about moonlight also. And the way I interpret the Verlaine poem is that things that are familiar to you under moonlight can become completely different and unusual, and that can be good or bad. But just this idea of abstraction or filtering something, it felt close to emergence to me, although it's not. I understand, but still, it's sort of part of that same discussion. So we were like, hey, we love moonlight, and we've got this Claude Verlaine poem that became a Debussy song, that became a Isao Tomita did a really beautiful version of the Debussy version, and so there's like all these translations. So we're going to make a sculpture based on the Isao Tomita that's also like taking into account our upbringing in the moon tower that was a block away from us. So that's what these are, these things we call, this is like a process where I just actually, I love sculpting in wax, which is really difficult, but once I kind of cracked it, I really loved it. And what's cool about sculpting in wax is you cast it directly in bronze. There's no mold. I know a lot of you probably know the process, but you sculpt directly in wax. It's not ever going to be reproduced again, and you're able to create really large scale. To sculpt at this scale is hard. I don't know if I've been fiddling with wax for such a long time that we can kind of manage it. But
and this is essentially just coil building, and I mean Nikki's kind of 3D printing this thing by hand. That's a good way to think about how this was made.
So here you can see the texture. It's like very much. I don't know if you remember being like a kid in middle school, and you would like start with like a little like star shape, and you would just make like a loop around it over and over again, and it's kind of like this like stoner art inside of your like composition notebook or something. It's like a 3D licorice version of that, and then eventually these become, these are sort of original maquettes that we're trying to get the shape off of, and so these are now becoming these like huge moon towers that we're making. So you can see the scale here. This is some rendering Simon did to sort of give people the idea of what it was that we were creating. But here it is. It's not completely finished, but this is it. There's not a human in it. Well, you can see that tire. Oh yeah, there you go in the background. It's huge.
I think this one's 24 feet tall.
24 feet.
Massive.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing we've done for sure.
Right. So we're going to do 4 of these for the National Museum, which we're really excited about, and then some other projects. Here's some more stuff that we've done in wax, and now, we haven't really been making ceramics for a little while, but we're revisiting accretion in wax form and doing it in bronze and in glass, which is really exciting for us.
Oh, yeah, so we've gotten very into glass lately. We went to Pilchuck Glass School. If anyone is into glass, you've got to go there. But we got kind of obsessed with glass, and now we're trying to make pâte de verre accretion. So pâte de verre is glass paste. It's basically just glass powder that is suspended in a binder, and the binder has to be generally edible. It's got to be something that'll burn out in the kiln really easily and cleanly. So we're using like flax glue and egg whites and all kinds of weird stuff. It was fun. We've been testing out slimes to like make them.
Simon's formulating the glues. It's cool because usually pâte de verre doesn't project so much, so it needs a whole kind of new approach to making it. And what's cool about using glass in our accretions is you can basically make it look exactly like ceramic if you wanted to. So we have that ability. Plus now we can scale. We can get up to probably 6 feet in a glass work. We would start with a blown glass pieces. Then we would accrete it with pâte de verre. We would cover it in plaster, put it back in the kiln, and have the whole thing fused together. So we kind of get the opportunity to scale it. So we can do like 6-foot works, and we can start to mess around with opacity, which is really fun. Can't do that in clay, not in the same way that you can with glass. So like we can make like a completely clear neck, or we could make it, glow from the inside out, which is pretty fun.
So this is still very much in the test phase. We haven't had a successful one come out of the kiln yet, but I think we will. But it will look like sort of a frosted glass. It's beautiful. If you haven't seen it, there's it was popular in the 20s. If you've seen sort of like Art Nouveau vases with roses all over them that look frosted glass, it has that. That's the same process.
So we love doing really like really kind of old school process and fucking it up. So you'll see at the end of this, you'll see what we're talking about.
This is a really large one. Will be in bronze, and we're using beeswax, which has a really different character, and you can go against physics a little bit more. So we're just building this one to the point where it's overbuilt, basically. And here we go. This is
okay. So
this will be the end of the.
Yeah. Speaking of like fucking up classic ways of building stuff. So that we started in Procreate, just did some sketches, some funny stuff. We knew that we wanted to use stone and glass blowing, right? Which are two like very like old school crafts. So here's a couple just images of concept.
And we just a little background. We grew up carving stone. Our dad was a stone carver, and he had us work with him in his shop like since we were 12 years old. So we're pretty versed in stone carving, and we developed a relationship with a quarry in Portugal. And when we were there, we were taken to our main carver. Is a restorer for this one church called Battaglia. That's the most amazing example of Gothic stone carving that I've ever seen. And basically her whole job is to take pieces that are starting to fall apart, replicate them, and then put them back up. And that's for every amazing stone church that you find or any stone building, somebody is having to do that because the stone is just disintegrating over time.
Something that's unusual about the Portuguese church that I hadn't seen anywhere else, like when you look at Italian or German, is that the carvers would sign each piece that went into the church. So if it's a floor tile, if it's a corbel, if it's some sculpture, they would put their signature somewhere on it. A lot of them were illiterate at the time that they're making the church too, so it wasn't always like a word or even letters. It could just be a symbol. And so we were walking around the church and kept finding this snail. There was like an image of a snail that was one of the carver's signatures, and we were like, wow, that's so beautiful, because at the time that they were building this church, they could be like one generation deep. It's going to take 3-4 generations to build this thing. So they're putting this snail, and by the way, it was earlier work. It was like stuff that were like the bottom of pillars, floor tiles, little sculptures near the ground, which meant, they would literally like build up the walls, the columns, they'd fill it with sand, and they would keep going until the whole thing was done, and then drain the sand out of it. So it's chronicled. It's like starts at the very beginning, and it's not like they're building the whole thing at once. So it was just beautiful. You go, wow, whoever Snail's signature was never got to see this thing finished. And there's like, we were just thinking on how crazy that is. We get to make things come to fruition all the time. It's really fun. You get to see it. There's like this release. It's really beautiful. But the meat of craft really is this meditation, digging inside of it, being there just to experience the making process, really.
And I think the snail was a symbol for him of like, it's very slow, and snails are also really fragile, and he wasn't going to survive to see the thing. And he was sort of pointing out that it's slow, but he's doing it anyway, which we thought was really beautiful. And during COVID, that kept coming up for us, and we wanted to make a show just based on that snail that we saw. But since it's us, we kind of screwed it up a little.
Yeah, like so first of all, we know that snail shells don't have backs to them, so but we were sort of like, well, it's like a Ninja Turtle shell. I mean, or no, like a Mario Brothers, like the shell that you throw at things, and we started making it just like stupid and funny. That one is just obscene.
So here's a rendering of what they should look like. Very candy, really weird. We also thought that like sexualizing a snail is the last thing anyone would ever want to do.
I keep joking, like we just made what we knew everyone has always wanted, which is a super sexy snail,
And then, this is cool. So this is one of them being made in Seattle.
What's fun for us is that we had to search for a glory hole that was large enough for us to be able to make. Yeah, it's called a glory hole.
That is a glory hole.
We needed a huge glory hole. But we needed to find a place that had big enough tools to actually make the work that we wanted to make. Because and really, which basically I'm still making dumb puns on accident. Glory holes and tools, but basically, Seattle or Czech Republic, those were your two options, and so we ended up making these in Seattle, so we're getting to like really push the technical abilities, which is awesome.
And then just combining stone and glass as materials, they when they're finished, they kind of hate each other, like they'll break. It's not a normal combination, and they're also very opposite. With stone carving, it's chipping away slowly. With glass, you cannot put it down for the entire time you're working on it. So
they're both just silica.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of interesting. They're sort of the same material, So and it's the oldest material and the newest material for us. We wanted to combine them. It just felt nice.
And then this is us. So we're actually installing this show now. We were doing it before we came here today, and we're going to go back and finish installing. But this is our first set of snails, and there's that little guy.
This is just iPhone photos. It was from yesterday. But again, it's just taking a joke way too far.
And that's it.
Cool.
So
thanks, y'all.
We want to. We wanted to open it up to questions. I think we have a little bit of time, right? Yeah.
Hi, I think your work is amazing. I actually have two questions, but they're both short. The first one is, how has the pandemic changed your work, what you say? Because I always tell people art asks or answers the important questions of the day, and I'm interested how the last 3 years have impacted on your work. And the second thing is, I've never talked to two artists who work so closely together. Do you have a shared or specific rituals for working like many artists do?
So COVID had a really big impact on our studio. We had a large studio that was vibrant, and it was so much fun. It was 20 people. We were all just constantly making and joking around, and COVID completely put an end to that. And that was devastating for us, and we had to go through a process of sort of rediscovering what it was like to just make work, basically the two of us. And we weren't even able to see each other in the beginning, so we were generally in studio together making stuff. And doing sculpture via email is like really, or Zoom or whatever, is not that much fun. So we had to, it was sad. The impact of it lasted for a long time. But what came out of it is this snail thing we were just talking about actually is sort of a representation of that. We discovered in ourselves that it's more, maybe it's trite, but it's about the process, not where you wind up. And just sort of using making as a meditation and really enjoying every second of the process.
Well, also just like it's really fun to walk into a studio where there's a bunch of you guys, everyone's together, you're having a bunch of fun, you're making jokes, you're listening to music and dancing around and doing shit. But also, it was a beautiful opportunity. Like, it feels like we're starting over in a lot of ways, and also having to really focus on each other to hold the studio up. And we'd gone through some trials and tribulations when we had the bigger studio practice, and now it's like we're doing it again, but this is way more. We're focused on each other, on our collaboration, and really depending on the trust between each other that we've always had, but pushing it as deeply as we can. So it's like, it's really fun to go to a party, but it's also really fun to have like a nice deep conversation with your best friend. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. It was like a big party. It was really fun, right, Justin? It's pretty fun. And I think
Justin was there.
We'll have parties again, but right now we're having like a very intimate conversation,
And I mean, it goes back to the disaster as opportunity thing. And I'm in a program of recovery. I had a moment where I really had to get sober, and it's a similar thing where some of the worst things that can happen actually will ground you or give you new direction. They become your strengths. So I think nobody wanted that to happen, but there are some nice things that came out of it for us. And then just to answer your second question quickly, we don't have a set routine. I'd say that the most consistent thing is that Nikki and I are just talking to each other all the time, and we'll have ideas and call each other, text each other about it. And then we have we work like 9 to 5, a normal work schedule. And just make sure that we're both there at the same time to work through all of those things. But we are bouncing around a lot.
We were actually doing a lot more of what we used to do when we first started our studio, which is really nice. A lot of real like hands-on making stuff. We've gotten to get really involved with our work, I think, on a deeper level than we had maybe for the past 5 or 6 years, which is honestly super exciting. It's really nice. It's also really nice to see everyone that we worked with before, like Justin, like everyone's starting their own careers, doing really big, beautiful stuff with themselves. So it's like I don't know. It's like it's sad, but it's better. Like like Justin, what you were telling us, what you're up to, or like what Henry and Belly are up to is fucking awesome. Yeah. Like there's people that worked inside of our studio that now absolutely have their own pumping careers, and they're doing really beautiful stuff, and they wouldn't have done that. I don't think they would have ever left. So I don't know. It's kind of nice. Yeah, I mean, it's sad, but it's like it's good. It feels good.
I just wanted to congratulate you. Everything that you've made is aesthetically beguiling. As far as the editing with each other and working with each other, everything you've made as far as Versace and your jewelry collaborations, clearly you're feminist, you're liberated. When I took some pre-med courses, when they brought out the brain to dissect, you basically realized the brain is primary. The eyes and the ears are basically accessories, and the brain really wouldn't care if you spend $500 on shoes. It wants to be enlightened, and it wants to evolve. So I was wondering if you would share why it's important for everyone to travel and to curate the brain and the mind like a kingdom and a museum, and why you need to bring in music, and why it's important to dance, and why it's important to have a circle of friends and be intellectually liberated in that way.
I mean, I agree with you on everything you just said, and but
Yeah, and thank you.
traveling is, I mean, traveling is amazing because you're just reframing your experience, and if you've ever struggled to translate something, or there's a lot of words like in various languages that don't have a direct translation. There are pieces of the human experience that are missing from your experience if you don't go outside of what you know, and if you haven't had to make that translation. And that can come in dancing. Music can take you somewhere. It's not just physically going somewhere else. But definitely every time we travel, we can't help but we're in a new place, and we feed off of our environment. So our brains are changing as we do it.
Yeah, and then also you just don't know where inspiration is going to come from. Like everyone, I don't know. I wasn't. I mean, I loved art and sculpture, but I never envisioned. Simon did. He had more vision. I never envisioned it as a career, or thought that I would ever be able to do that, and didn't try to get to that place. And we ended up there, which was amazing. I was more inspired by music, and always played as a kid, and then did professionally for a little while. And it's I think just doing anything creative is just good for you, And luckily for us, we get to do it all the time. And again, it kind of comes down to like permission, again, in a way. Like we got permission to do things that allowed us to really like grow. And I feel so lucky for that. Like I don't know if we hadn't had those moments with like Donatello being like, make some shit that you just, basically just dreamed of, and here's a budget to do it. It wasn't huge, but it was enough for us to really like make something weird and cool. But I mean, I can't agree with you more about like a community. I have this like thing that I'm almost the most proud of that I've ever started. I'm joking, but it's like a dad book club, and it's just like dads only. And there's like 10 of us, and we read a book a month-ish. And it's like all of them are mostly creatives. It's like a lot of music producers and some screenwriters and stuff. And there's like, I don't feel like I have a more substantial like social interaction than that, because everyone's there. You can tell the truth. You're not just like at a party taking drugs and like having fun. I mean, that's cool too, or was for a second. But it's like you're sitting there and you're talking about stuff you really care about. And the last book, we read this book called Every Man, which is pretty awesome. And I think like the discussion for us ended up being like, none of us are particularly religious, but I don't know, we've made this space where we all meet and speak with each other and talk about ideas that are generally things that we can't explain, which are the most interesting ideas, I think, which is also maybe the function of religion. We're going, oh, this is like our version of that. We're meeting and talking about things. So peers to me, first of all, my brother who I can talk about anything. And then, I have my wife who's like the greatest person on earth, and my son who's really the greatest person on earth, who has like the craziest perspective on everything. I think like traveling, art, music, all of it, if you're allowing yourself to be open to it, you're just absorbing other people's perspectives. And I think that's really important. Like it's all about, life is going to be so much better if we're just empathetic, and if we try to understand other people. And, I think that's just a big part of our studio practice, and what we want to use it for is just like, trying to be like, this is us, and we want to understand you, and we want to let you have space to decide what our work's even about, right? Like it's just, that's just human interaction. It's what everyone wants, right? So, I don't know.
Let's see, Garrett?
I have a question. I thought it was really interesting, like how you were impacted by your father growing up, and then you mentioned your 5-year-old son, and I was wondering, like, how does your work has impact your child in a way, and then has he inspired you, and then what's your experience with that, and what do you hope to impact on your child in the future?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a big question and a good one. Thank you. I like it. My son, I'm a really big ice hockey player, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna teach my kid hockey and blah blah blah. He could not be even a little bit interested in it, which is fucking awesome. I love it. But the funny thing is, like, I love hockey, but sculpture is my life. Like, I do it every day, all the time. And he's obsessed with sculpting wax specifically, which is what I do all day, every day. And he tells everyone, he's like, yeah, so I'm a sculptor, and like he's into it. So he already loves what we're up to. He can come to a museum show, and if we're in like a group thing, he can pick out what Simon and I have made, which is fucking. I mean, I've never been more proud in my life when he was like, "You guys made," he basically got it. And what do I want to impact on him? I think, like, as a parent, I think the two most important things for a child are safety and love. Like, that's all I want to give him. Is just I want him to feel really safe, and I want him to know that he's loved, and like that's really important. Whatever he wants to do with that, like I don't ever want to be the person that's like trying to force him. I'm not going to force him to play hockey. He's not going to have fun, right? I would love it if he was like the next Ed Belfour. It'd be amazing. You know what I'm saying? But it's okay that he's never going to be that or doesn't want to be. And I think if I made him feel like there was something wrong with him, he wouldn't be safe, So I think that's what I'm going to do for my son, and he's already affected. I mean, he would be 4th generation sculptor if he actually did that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, our grandfather was also a sculptor, and our dad learned from him. And I mean, I think, and that's just exposure to, I don't know how many like 12-year-olds are carving stone. It's unusual. But it was just, we were just exposed to it, and we were like, I want to try that out. And then suddenly we have like a facility with stone that is really strange, and that if you can do that, you can do a lot of other materials. So it was exposure and encouragement, and I think just like, not to speak to how you are with Fox, but just letting us know that this is possible, I think, was the main thing.
Yeah, and I think he's absolutely affected the way that I see work, and I think absolutely affected the way that Simon sees making work. Like, I care so much more about making it really tight. Like, I want it to be made with generosity and love and trust and be just work, which before we were interested in as well, but it was also, I think, I was definitely more interested in Flash, and now I'm just like, I want to make great things that he can look at and be like, whoa, my dad made that, which is, that's like more the driving force than anything, and he's the most significant thing that's ever happened to me, for sure, like it's those of you that have kids, you know what I'm talking about. It's wild, and he's completely changed the way, I chaperoned his, we did like a trip to the LACMA, his kindergarten did, and I chaperoned 4 kids. And I was like taking him around the LACMA, and I was like, had a moment where I was like, oh my God, this is the most important thing I've ever done in my life. I got really nervous. I was like, I have to do this really right, because like they like expect, I'm with other people's kids, and like they expect me to know what I'm talking about because I'm an artist, and that's like why they chose me to chaperone these 4 kids. And like, of course, I could have done anything and they would have had the best time ever, and they loved it. And I caught my son, he'd stopped in front of a Philip Guston painting, and I'm a huge Philip Guston fan, and completely unprompted, he just stopped and looked at it for a minute, which for a 5-year-old is a long time to stop and look at a painting, and he was just totally sucked in by it. I was like, dude, he's my son. And I was like, it's making me emotional even thinking about it. He was just so into it. He loves sculpting wax. He loves Philip Guston. And I'm just like, he might not love hockey, but he loves the things that are really like true to my heart, and it's pretty cool. I don't know. He's changed everything for me. I think he's made art and design and everything that I engage in feel so much more important. But also at the same time, like, nothing matters compared to just like making him stoked and happy and like safe and loved. So, but it's also important. Like, Philip Guston reached into the future and touched my, like touched my child's imagination and made him feel inspired. And that's like maybe I can do that too. It's fucking cool, I don't know. So that was a cool experience for me. He completely flipped the way I look at what I do, for sure.
We have time for one more question. Nancy?
Thank you. I would just love to hear more about your interest in mushrooms and what you've done with that. I personally am writing a lot about that right now in terms of art and mushrooms, so I would love to learn about your experiences with like psilocybin. And I know you said you're sober, but I just wanted to know what inspired you to do work with that.
I mean, I'm pretty far. I'm 6 years removed from having ever taken any of that, so I don't have a personal attachment to them right now. But I think if there was one cool thing about it, it was spoke more to that question about travel than anything else, because it was an immediate reframing of your reality, and we're also. Mushrooms are just broadly, not even necessarily psilocybin, have really strange shapes. They can survive everywhere. They are like a weird network. There's so much to like about them, and they're not plants or animals. I mean, it's a very strange, organism.
I mean, mushrooms are really significant for me, for
Yeah,
sure.
We definitely did a lot of them.
Yeah, and I don't really do it any longer, but like there's a place near and dear in my heart for it, for sure, because it just gave me such alternate perspective. And again, it's like there's people that are like, oh, like the mushrooms aren't going to make your work for you, right? Like it's opening a door, it's changing your experience. I mean, for me, what was really nice is, psilocybin really diminishes your ego a lot. You feel very like, I mean, for those of you that have taken it, I'm just going to sound like, I mean, duh, right? But you feel like you're sort of part of everything. Is part of everything. You're part of the world. Everyone is one, and there's something really beautiful about that experience, because it never really leaves you. Like once you have it, so a door's been open, and for me, and I think for you too, at the time, like making sculptures in Ode to Mushrooms was sort of just, it was really just, there were sculptures that were really just dedicated to alternative thought and different experience, and that's all mushrooms are, but I will say, like, I think what happened to Simon and what happened to me too is like, just don't chase the tail of the dragon. That's all. Like it does, like its ability diminishes once it's open. That you can't open the door over and over and over and over again. It's not like once you've opened it, it's there. Sure, like you can revisit that once in a while, but it's a trip, right? Keep it that way. How often do you go to Hawaii, for a vacation, or how often do you, like just don't take them every day, or like and put some space around it. Like you can last minute decide to go Hawaii. That's totally cool. You don't have to like plan it out. Like I have a docket and I have like a program. That's totally fine. But you don't last minute decide to go to Hawaii every other day. So I'm just saying, like, treat it like that. That's would be my one piece of advice, because it's like you're young and it's like it's profound and super impactful. But when you start to get older and you've done it a couple times, at least in my experience, it's like, I mean, being with my son is way more psychedelic than taking mushrooms, and like much more substantial. And I think there's something about mushrooms where I'm a big Paul Stamets fan. I'm like very into. I get it. I really like. But I think what I'm a fan of, you don't hold the mushroom on a pedestal, because it's just a thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like humans are what make it good in the end, right? And it's gonna run out at some point. Just like going to a playground is like, at some point, okay, I'm 13 years old, I can't be like hanging out on the playground and jumping around and like really using it. Although I've seen adults do that too, but it's weird. You know what I'm saying? At some point, it's just like, it's a phase of your life. It's really beautiful. It's super cool. Once in a while, you can go back. When you have a kid again, you get to go play on the playground again. It's fun. You get to see it through their eyes, which is really cool. But am I making sense?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Playgrounds, really important at developing your motor skills and like getting cool and all that stuff. So like for me, it changed a lot, and it really opened my mind a whole lot. But like you got to just understand that at some point you're gonna like need to move past it. It can't just be or for me, it was like, this can't be like a center point of my life. It's not that. It's don't give it too much power in that way. And then every once in a while when you're older and like you have a babysitter and you're on vacation and everyone's super safe, go for it. You know what I'm saying? But you're revisiting the playground, I guess, is kind of my point. and once you're closing in on 40, like we are, so.
Thank you so much, Nikki and Simon.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, you guys.